Well, we can go ahead and get started and people will join us as they can. Welcome everyone to the Utah Center for Legal Inclusion's Wednesday webinars. Today we're really excited to have 3 judges from 3 different appellate courts joining us. If you haven't joined us in the past, we're really excited to have you for the first time. And in the past few weeks, we've had some great presentations by attorneys working in the realm of law and politics. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to those, you can go back on our website and watch those recordings. We have presentations from Marina Lowe, who is the ACLU's Legislative and Policy Counsel. We met with 2 different attorneys from the Legislative, I always get this name wrong, Legislative Council and General Counsel's Office at the Utah State Legislature, along with Representative Stephanie Pitcher, who talked about her job as both an attorney and a legislator. So we've had some great presentations over the last few weeks, if you all would like to go back and watch those. And then of course from earlier weeks as well. But this month we wanted to shift focus and talk about the judiciary. We are going to have today, of course, the appellate courts. And I'll type in the website to rewatch those prior webinars in just a moment. So thank you for that question. And that reminds me, as we go through, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A and I will monitor those and help to keep track of them for the panelists. But this month we are starting out with our appellate judges, and then next week, we're going to be joining forces with the Women Lawyers of Utah and hosting an event that's a tribute event to the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We're going to hear from retired Utah Supreme Court Justice Christine Durham, and we'll also be watching some videos that are tributes to Justice Ginsburg. So it should be a really fun event, and we have some giveaways as well. And then on November 18th, we'll be hearing from some trial court judges across the state. And that'll be a great panel. We have Judge Campbell from the Federal District Court, Judge Jennifer Brown from the 4th District Court in the state, and Judge Clem Landau from the Salt Lake City Justice Court. But today I wanted to start out, I think it's helpful, or at least my interns told me this would be helpful, so I'm hopeful that this is true. To start out, I'm going to share my screen for just a moment and just give a brief introduction to the structure of our courts in Utah. Let's see, there we go. Okay, can you all see that chart? I guess I can't tell if you can or not because you don't have video. But so this is a chart that we came up with at UCLI. And as the quote from the Article 3 of the Constitution says, you know, the judicial power is vested in one Supreme Court, but then in also other courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So in our system, we have in each state, both federal courts that operate interpreting federal laws. And then as a parallel system, we have our state courts. So if we start down here at the justice court level in the state courts, these are the courts that handle smaller cases, misdemeanors for criminal cases, small claims, and other types of cases where there are smaller money amounts in question. And from there, those cases can be appealed to the district court, but the district court in the states also handles, in the first place, they handle felonies and all lawsuits that are over a certain amount in question. We also have the juvenile courts that handle all cases involving juveniles. The Utah Court of Appeals is the court that handles any issues when trials or other decisions at the district court and juvenile court levels are coming into question. So if a party thinks that something has gone wrong at the trial court level, they can then appeal to the Utah Court of Appeals. And Judge Jill Pohlman, that we have on the call with us today, or the webinar, is one of the judges on the Utah Court of Appeals. From there, we also have the Utah Supreme Court. So in Utah, we have 2 levels of appellate courts in the state court system. The Utah Supreme Court hears any appeals from the Utah Court of Appeals. So again, if parties feel like the Utah Court of Appeals got it wrong, or if there's something that needs to be reviewed again, then they can go up to the Utah Supreme Court. And in addition, the Utah Supreme Court can hear cases in the first instance of certain issues And we'll have Justice Paige Petersen, who's from the Utah Supreme Court, kind of explain that a little bit more. But the Utah Supreme Court is a discretionary or a certiorari court, which means that they decide the cases that they will take and adjudicate. On the federal court side, we also have trial courts, and these are called the U.S. district courts. In Utah, we just have one. It's the District of Utah. And we also have specialty courts that handle certain types of cases, such as bankruptcy and immigration, where there's a unique set of very intricate laws that need to be handled by people who understand that system very well. And so we have the specialty courts that are also handling cases in those realms. And those cases from both the district court and the specialty courts can be appealed to the U.S. Courts of Appeals. Utah is covered by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which also handles cases from several other states in the region, including Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, and I'm forgetting some others, I'm sure. Montana, no, not Montana. I always forget this.
New Mexico.
New Mexico, thank you. Such a weird little zigzag that we have going on there. And we have Judge Carolyn McHugh from the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals with us today. And we're really excited to have her talk about her work there. And finally, both cases from the state courts and from the U.S. Courts of Appeals can be appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And of course, we just recently have a new appointee to the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. So we now have 9 justices again, and they decide which cases they will take in each term. And usually those are the ones where the different courts of appeals or different states have decided things differently, and we need to have a more consistent and uniform decision. So that's a basic rundown of the courts there. And I'm going to take off my screen share so we can hear from our panelists. But as I said, today we have judges from 3 of those appellate courts. We do not have a Supreme Court justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, unfortunately, with us today, but we do have Judge Jill Pohlman from the Utah Court of Appeals, Justice Paige Petersen from the Utah Supreme Court, and Judge Carolyn McHugh from the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. As I normally do, that's about the extent of the introduction that I'm going to give, but each of these fabulous judges are going to give us a little bit more introduction as to their career and why they went to law school. And I normally start with why people went to law school, but I think I'm actually gonna start this time with, why don't you each explain what your career has been like from law school to a judge? What jobs have you had before becoming a judge? And we'll start with Judge Pohlman, then go to Justice Petersen, and then Judge McHugh.
Thanks, Melinda. It's nice to be with everyone today. I appreciate the invitation to speak on this. So my career, I haven't done that many different things. I got out of law school and did a clerkship at the U.S. Federal District Court. I clerked for the Honorable David K. Winder, who, in my opinion, was one of the best judges Utah has ever seen and just a wonderful human being. And I learned a lot from him and really gave me a great foundation to be a lawyer. I got to see what it was like to sit behind the scenes and to see how judges make decisions and to see what worked and what didn't work from lawyers. And so I really enjoyed that year. After that, I joined the law firm of Stoll Reeves. Stoll Reeves is a regional firm. It's centered in the Pacific Northwest, has offices in several different states, had an office here in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is where I worked. And technically, I would call myself a trial lawyer, although I would often say that I was more of a summary judgment lawyer, did a lot of motion practice, a lot of discovery, worked on a lot of different kinds of cases, did employment law, general business law, occasionally had constitutional issues, some white collar criminal work, property, environmental. I mean, really, you name it. I got to see a lot of different things, did some appellate work as well, and also administrative work. I worked before a lot of agencies. So I worked there and was eventually a partner there, worked there for 19 years, and then joined the Utah Court of Appeals just over 4 years ago.
Hi, it's great to be here with everyone and to be here with Judge Pohlman and Judge McHugh, both judges who I think are amazing and I really look up to. So it's really great to be here with both of you today and with Melinda Bowen, who's doing such great work at UCLI. So I had a little different path than Judge Pohlman. I went into criminal law instead of civil law. So I'll describe a little bit about that path. I also did a clerkship. I clerked for a federal district court judge in Cincinnati, Ohio for 2 years. And I loved that also because you get to see behind the scenes how the judge makes a decision and what it's like when you get the two opposing briefs and you have to be part of the process that's trying to come up with the right answer. That was great to watch. And I think it helped me a lot as a lawyer. After that, I went to New York City and I worked at a law firm doing civil litigation for just under 2 years. But I decided that that wasn't the direction that I wanted to go in for my career because I was doing a lot of motion practice and I wanted to be in the courtroom more. And so I ended up applying for some jobs in the criminal field because from what I could see, you ended up going to court a lot more than what I was doing. And I think it might be different between Utah firms and New York firms because the firm I was in was really, really big. So I don't know if lawyers at Utah law firms go to court more, but at my firm in New York, I thought I would never see the inside of a courtroom for years. So I ended up getting a job at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. So I was a federal prosecutor there for about 5 years, and I loved it. I did criminal cases ranging from international drug trafficking organizations and extraditing drug kingpins who were at the top of the top of the organization. I did organized crime and mafia prosecutions. I did all sorts of different things in Brooklyn, and it was a really great experience. And then I did international criminal law. I went to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, Netherlands. And I was on the prosecution side, prosecuting crimes against humanity and war crimes that took place during the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo in 1999. And I was on a trial. The trial was a lot different than the trials we have here. It was under sort of different rules in The Hague. And we had a trial that went on for 2 years against the former chief of police of Serbia for ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. And when that was done, I came back and moved back to Utah, where I'm from. I grew up in Utah and worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Salt Lake City doing the same job I had when I was in Brooklyn, and I was in the violent crime section. And I was there for 3 years. And then there were some openings in the 3rd District Court on the state bench on the trial level. And someone suggested to me, one of my colleagues on the Supreme Court, Dino Himonas, said, you should apply for one of those. And I thought that was crazy. I thought I'll never get that. And I applied, and on my 3rd try, I did. And I hadn't planned to do that. That wasn't what I thought I was going to do, but it's a career that I absolutely love, and it's right for me. So I was on the trial court bench, the district court, for 2 years, and now I've been on the Utah Supreme Court for about 2.5 years.
I had to unmute. It's not fair to have to go after Justice Petersen, but I graduated from law school back, I'm the oldest of this group, back in 1982, and I clerked on the Federal District Court of Utah for Judge Bruce Jenkins, who still hears cases as a senior judge, and it was a marvelous experience. I've recused on all his cases because now I'm in a position where I would review his work, but it just doesn't seem right to me. So out of respect, I recuse on his cases. And that was, I think that that it's already been described, but the advantage of clerking, you get to see how the process works, and it's invaluable experience. So after I did that, I joined the firm of Parr, Brown, Gee and Lovelace, which is a Salt Lake City firm. And I was there as a litigation associate and then a litigation partner for 22 and a half years. I did all kinds of, as like Judge Pohlman, I had a wide variety of cases that I did, everything from title insurance to securities fraud to environmental litigation, contract disputes, everything. And interestingly, in the beginning of my career, I'd say the first 10 years, the first decade, lots of things went to trial and I got a fair amount of trial experience. But over time, it seemed that fewer and fewer companies, and my firm generally represented Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, less and less were they willing to roll the dice in front of a jury. So like Judge Pohlman, they used to refer to me as the dispositive motion queen, because even when it wasn't my case, people would come to me to ask me to write complex memoranda seeking a way to win your case before you actually go to trial. And I actually really liked it. A lot of people hate that stuff because it's very law-oriented and detail-oriented, and you have to dig through all of the evidence that you've developed in both document production and in statements under oath of witnesses to come up with your arguments for why you should win without even having to go to trial. But that sort of became something that I really liked doing. And at some point, there was an opening on the Utah Court of Appeals, which is the court that Judge Pohlman is now on. And I wasn't going to apply because they already had 3 women on the court, and I guess they already had 2 women on the court at that time. And everyone kept telling me that, they don't need any more women on that court. There's no reason the governor has to appoint a woman, so you shouldn't even apply. It'd just be a waste of your time. But it was almost the last day that I finally said, I'm going to do it. And I put my application in, and I was very fortunate to be appointed and confirmed by the Utah Senate. And I served on that court for 8.5 years and absolutely loved it. Loved my colleagues, loved the work. It's a very heavy volume court. You work hard, a lot of cases. It never stops. And then about, it's 6.5 years ago now, there was an opening because Judge Murphy, who was on the 10th Circuit, announced he was going senior. And I got a call from a friend of mine that I rode bikes with, but I actually thought that he didn't like me very much because we had been against each other on some firm issues when we were both at the same firm. But he called me up and really encouraged me to apply, although I'm not really sure you apply for the position. I had to send a letter to Senator Orrin Hatch, and at that time, Congressman Matheson, who was the highest ranking Democrat in Utah. And so you send a letter. And then I interviewed with them and eventually was appointed by President Obama to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And I have served on that court now for 6.5 years, and it's a very heavy docket. We're busy, and I think being on the Utah Court of Appeals was the best preparation I could get for being thrown into that situation, because they don't coddle you. They just hand you a very full caseload and say, get it done. And I've enjoyed it, and I love my colleagues, and it's very interesting work. I can tell you, but for talented law clerks like Professor Bowen, Melinda Bowen, who was one of my law clerks, there's no way that a judge, any of us, can handle the volume of work and the complexity of the work that we're asked to digest and understand and rule upon month after month after month. I mean, it just keeps coming. So thank you, Melinda. But I will say I miss the Utah Court of Appeals because the big difference is the social part of it. All of the judges in the Utah Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court are all in the Matheson Courthouse, downtown Salt Lake City. As Melinda pointed out, my court I'm on now is over 6 states, and my colleagues live in different states than I do. And so while I get along really well with them, I don't see them very often. I only see them when we have argument in Denver, and we're not traveling because of the pandemic. So it's lonely work right now. There's a lot of it and it's lonely. So.
Thank you, Judge McHugh. And I did forget to mention, I did clerk with Judge McHugh. That was one of my clerkships. And each of these judges mentioned that they clerked with a judge, you know, early on in their legal careers. Judge McHugh, just as a follow-up, maybe we can jump from what I originally planned, and each of you can talk about what the role is of a judicial clerk. And because I think that's also a lesser known position to the general public that is actually playing a pretty important role behind the scenes.
The role of a judicial clerk, we refer to them as elbow clerks because they work right at your elbow. And in the Utah Court of Appeals, I had 2 clerks. And the Utah Court of Appeals, last time I looked, was doing about 900 cases a year. And during that clerkship, there was absolutely no choice but for me to be, I had to function both as a clerk and as a judge because you just don't have enough capacity. And I didn't have a secretary or a judicial assistant. So I was also drafting my own rejection letters and typing envelopes and stuff on the weekend, which is a ridiculous use of judicial time, just my aside. On the 10th Circuit, I have 4 elbow clerks, and they work really hard. I am a big believer in lots of preparation before you sit on the bench, before you hear oral argument. And so my clerks I give them a big packet of information of what they have to know. And then I read all the briefs. So for example, I'm getting ready for November right now. I'm sitting 4 days in a row, 6 cases each day. As you can, 24 cases, and some of them I have one where there's I think 6 parties, and then we have something like 8 amicus briefs. The amicus briefs are something that are filed by people who are not parties to the case, but have a unique interest in the issue, and they get permission from the court to file something. So the amount of paper is unbelievable. I used to feel like we used to do it in hard copy at the Utah Court of Appeals, and I used to feel like they rolled a wheelbarrow in my office every other week and just dumped a pile of briefs. Now they send them to me electronically on my iPad, and it like shuts down my iPad for a while because they can't sync all the information coming in. But my law clerks I read all the briefs, all the amicus briefs. And then my law clerks divide those cases among themselves. So they each get a 1/4 of my oral argument calendars. They also read the briefs and they do legwork for me. They collect all of the relevant cases that are important that I need to read before I hear the case. They go through issue by issue and look at whether the issue is properly before us. And that has some questions that we refer to as preservation and things. They also attach for me any statutes or any relevant information that I need to make a decision portions of the record that are important, like the district court's opinion, or perhaps if it's an, if it's an agency review, it will have the record of decision, which can be thousands of pages long. And they, thank God, they go through and they pull out for me the things that are germane to the arguments being made in the briefs. And I tell them they can tell me how they want the issue decided, but they don't have to. Most of them try, although sometimes they don't. I had one of my law clerks would always, every single issue, would always say, this is really close. I don't know how I would decide. But I don't, they tell me what they think, but I don't necessarily follow it. I make my own decision. And then they help me when we go to conference, after we hear the oral argument, the court gets together and decides who's going to write which decision. And then the law clerk who helped put together what we call the bench brief, the collection of all the materials and the analysis of the legal background and the factual issues, will help me draft the opinion for the panel.
All right, thank you, Judge McHugh. Judge Pohlman, does Judge McHugh's memory of the Utah Court of Appeals differ at all from what is happening currently? And how do you utilize your clerks right now?
She remembers it perfectly. We do have a very heavy caseload. When I joined the court, Judge Stephen Roth was one of my colleagues, and he told me that it was like a treadmill that never turns off. And I thought it was so true. And I tell my friends from practice that, in private practice, there's times where you feel like you're on a really steep incline on that treadmill and you feel like you're going to die. But then the treadmill stops and you get to jump off for a minute and you kind of reset. And then you go through that a lot. And that's what's hard about private practice, I think, is it does have those, that roller coaster kind of feel to it. But I think he was right about the Court of Appeals. It's just, it doesn't quite have the steep of inclines, but at the same time, it's just always running and there's really no give. So we do stay very, very busy. And I will just say that before I joined the court, I used to write all the time. Like Judge McHugh, I was someone in my office that wrote a lot of dispositive motions, a lot of appellate briefs, loved doing that. And when I got appointed to the court, I had about 2 weeks to hire law clerks. And I remember telling my colleagues, no worries. If I can't find anyone, I can write it. This is what I do. I'm good at this. And, within 2 weeks at the court, I said to myself, holy cow, there is no way I could do this job without great law clerks. And so I've been very fortunate to have some really talented, smart people join me. They are lawyers, but they work incredibly hard and they draft my opinions for me at the outset. And then I take those drafts, and sometimes I don't have to do a lot. Sometimes I have to completely rework it. It just depends on the case, and it's usually not their fault. It's sometimes you just finally see it on paper and you say, oh, wait a second, this doesn't work, not in the way I thought it was going to. So you kind of have to restructure and take a second go at it. But yeah, they're incredibly important. And if anyone out there is listening, I think doing a clerkship is just the greatest thing. We all talked about how much we loved ours. And so you will work hard, but you'll learn so much. And it's always just nice too, to have a mentor to look to throughout your career, as I think we all have with the judges we worked for.
Yes, I completely agree. I tell people all the time that my 2 clerkships are my favorite jobs I've ever had. So even though it's hard work, it's really great. Judge Petersen or Justice Petersen, do you have anything you want to add about how you utilize your clerks?
I think they really covered it. It's a great job, and it's great having that relationship with your clerks because you really rely on them, and I think it's just a really rewarding experience in both directions. So if you're thinking about doing that, it's a great thing to do. But I think they covered it really well. It's the same for me.
Okay, great. We have a question in the Q&A. How do students find the opportunity to be a law clerk? I can start by saying the law schools do a really good job of helping students through that process, and your professors can be really helpful. But from a judge's perspective, maybe Justice Petersen, we can start with you. Is there something that students can do to seek out those judicial clerkship opportunities in your court?
Well, we open applications, so definitely watch for that. And I think normally we hire people who are in their second years when people kind of apply, but that's not always the case. I've hired people who were in their third year or who were out of law school and had done a year at a firm, but it's normally new graduates of law school. And at least what I'm really looking for is there are a couple of things. So the job that the clerk does is they get the briefs from both sides and they need to try to figure out what the right answer is and help us. That's what we're doing. So that's their first cut. So they need to spot issues and really be able to, you can't just read the briefs and summarize. You need to read the briefs and really study the area of law and say, they're arguing this and this side's arguing this, but I think the answer is right here. And so you need to be able to show that you can analyze cases in that way. You've got to be able to analyze the information and be a really good writer. You're writing the first draft of an opinion for the judge. And then sometimes I think all of us are pretty hands-on. There's no just rubber stamping that goes on. We are reading everything ourselves and turning it over in our heads and analyzing it until we feel comfortable with it. So I go back and forth with my clerks a lot, but working on your writing skills as a lawyer and as a clerk, good writing skills are so important. So that's what I'm looking for, is really the ability to spot issues, analyze those issues in a logical way and write it up in a way that really helps me so that I have a good first draft to work from.
Judge Pohlman, do you have anything different that you look for in your clerks, or is the process different in your court?
I look for the same things, the same skill set. And I would just say that our website, if you go to the Utah Courts website, you can kind of get to the appellate court section. I can't tell you the exact way to get there, but there is information on there about each judge or justice that is looking for clerks and when to apply, what we want to see as far as writing samples, letters of recommendation. I know for me, the writing sample is important, but you just never know how many hands are on those, right? So I sometimes take those with a grain of salt, but I do look toward how students performed in their legal writing and research classes. And then I also really do pay close attention to those letters of reference. I feel like if you've been able to work with a professor or maybe in some other job, something where you have someone that can vouch for your work and tell me that you really do analyze well and write well and all of these things that I want to see, those things are really helpful for me to see. But just look at the website, because like Justice Petersen said, there kind of is a pattern to our hiring. Usually second year, I usually start interviewing around January, but at the same time, things change. And so all of a sudden I'll find myself needing a clerk in 9 months or something like that. And so you just, even if something didn't work out for you during kind of that normal season and you're still interested, I would always just kind of keep a lookout for those things, because every once in a while, someone will be looking for someone kind of out of the normal season.
Thank you for that encouragement. And I would echo that, because I didn't do my clerkships until I'd been practicing for 5 years. So there's some different paths to get there. And I posted the link in the chat for the Utah Appellate Courts clerkship information page. But Judge McHugh, the federal system is a different animal. Could you maybe give us your insights into how students can go about looking for clerkships?
Yeah, we use something called Oscar, and hopefully, Melinda, you can find the website and send it to them. But they take the applications online, and the judges can decide whether they just want online applications. I tried that when I first came on the bench, and every law student at every law school in the country hit send to all. And I got so many applications, I couldn't even function. And then I'd dig through them, call somebody, and they'd say, I don't want to live in Utah. think, why are you sending this to me? But so I have now anybody who applies with me has to actually take the time to make paper copies, stick it in an envelope, and have it mailed to me, because just that little bit tends to filter out the people. I mean, maybe when they're addressing the envelope, they see Salt Lake City, Utah, and they go, oh, wait, I don't want to live there. So that is one difference. And then the federal judges have an aspirational agreement that we will not interview someone who hasn't done I think it's a year and a half of law school, or it's at least a full year. I love people like Melinda that have done a prior clerkship, have actually practiced law, that really have experience. That's going to be very helpful to me. So I'm not looking for someone who just got their, midterm grades in the first year of law school. I like the fact that they've decided to go clerk for, Justice Petersen or Judge Pohlman, and then want to come work with me. I think that's great, because then the two of them can train them up right before I get them. But I also take people who are just coming out of law school, and like the others, for what we do as appellate court judges, particularly in the heavy docket cases like the 10th Circuit and the Utah Court of Appeals, I always describe it as being locked in a room and being thrown law review question after law review question after law review question. And you have to sit there and fill out blue books as fast as you possibly can and get it right. And so, not surprisingly, people who do well in legal writing, people who get asked to TA legal writing, and people who do extremely well on law school exams, therefore ending up at the top of their class and have a journal experience, are going to be on the top of the people that we're looking for in appellate court. But if you don't have that resume, it doesn't mean you cannot clerk. There are a bunch of different courts, and they look for different things. The juvenile court judges need clerks. The district court judges need clerks. There are so many, the bankruptcy judges need clerks. The magistrate judges need clerks. So don't be discouraged if Justice Gorsuch isn't going to offer you a clerkship on the United States Supreme Court, right? There are a lot of different ways to get a clerkship experience, and I think all of them would be enriching.
I agree. Thank you so much, Judge McHugh. In the previous responses to some of the questions, we hit on some of this, but what would you say is maybe the biggest positive and the biggest negative of your job on your particular court for each of you? And I'll start with Judge Pohlman this time, because I don't think we've started with her in the last few.
I would say one of my favorite things about being on the Court of Appeals is the fact that I get to work with really, really smart, caring, thoughtful, hardworking people. When I wanted to be a judge, you think, oh, I can do this. And then you get on the court and you think, I don't know about this. Can I really do this? And then the lucky thing about being on an appellate court is you get to work with other judges. So on our court and on Judge McHugh's court, we sit in panels of 3. So on our court, we have 7 members of our court, but when we make a decision on a case, there's 3 of us deciding that case at one time. And I love that part of my job, because I tend to read all those briefs and all those cases, and I'm a little bit like Judge McHugh's clerk, and I say, I don't know, wow, this is a close one, right? There's occasionally cases which are obvious, but I feel like those are rare. I feel like the cases that get to us are cases that are interesting and difficult. That's why people are appealing them, right? And so I love the fact that I get to sit down with 2 other colleagues and discuss and think and kind of bat our ideas back and forth to try to come up with the right decision. And also with my clerks. I mean, before I even conference with the other judges, I kind of have that opportunity with my clerks as well. And I just really think that's the greatest part of my job, is that I get to really think about interesting things, but it's not just me thinking about it on my own and having to make those decisions. I get to do it with some other really, really great people. So I love that. As far as a negative, I mean, the workload is tough, right? And I think surprisingly so. I know when I received the appointment to the Court of Appeals, I had numerous people in the community say to me, oh, you know, this will be a vacation for you. I had someone tell me that I would be doing, you know, about 50% of what I was doing at the firm. I even had one partner ask me one time when I hit the summer, he said, oh, so what does your summer look like? And I said, oh, well, I'm getting a lot more done because my kids aren't, you know, in school. And so I'm not having to help with homework at night. And he thought I was going to tell him that I had taken the summer off. People just have kind of the wrong perception about how hard we work. And so I would say that's a negative slightly, but I think that one thing that I do sometimes miss about, or from being on the appellate court, is that you don't get to be in the room with people as much, right? You're sitting in your office and you're making tough decisions and you're reading a lot about people's lives, but you don't get to be with those people. And every once in a while, when I'm in the Matheson courthouse, I'll go to, you know, one of the other floors for a meeting or something. And there was one day we were having a meeting and it was in the judge's courtroom because they were out of conference rooms in the courthouse. And I got to sit and watch the end of some proceedings. And I loved it. It was like this little spark in me that I thought, oh, I kind of miss this. I miss that energy of the trial court and just all that goes on there. And it was just so fun for me just to be kind of back in that environment for a minute. So I would say if there's a negative to it, I guess it's that. It's just that I miss kind of that energy of being around people and witnesses and juries and kind of that excitement. So you get it through the briefing, but you don't really feel it in the same way that you did as a practicing lawyer or maybe as a trial court judge.
Thank you. Justice Petersen, what's your perspective on your favorite and least favorite?
I agree with everything Judge Pohlman just said. I would have said some of the same things. On the con side, it's not that I would go back to being a trial court judge. I don't like that more, but there are parts of it that I miss. I miss having the litigants in the courtroom. We have oral argument with lawyers. We don't have the actual people who are being affected by our decisions right there before us. And oops, that's my doorbell. I'm sorry. Apologies for that. And so I miss that. And I miss, in terms of being a lawyer, you know, now we are sort of the objective referee sitting there weighing things in an impartial manner. And I miss being a competitor, you know, out in the field where I'm trying to make my point and persuade the jury or persuade the judge of my positions. I have some of that I think we all have that with our colleagues when we have to give our take on a particular issue, but I miss some of that, you know, the feeling of, oh, I won that. I don't win anything anymore. You know, so I miss the energy of that. But what I love is that you know, these jobs, we are using our brain just to the utmost of its ability. I am pushing myself as absolutely far as I can, because as everyone here has described, we have work coming at us constantly, and mine is hard in a little bit of a different way. I don't have the same numbers that the other two judges have, but everything that we have on the Utah Supreme Court, we probably have it because there's not a clear answer. We can't just look at the law and there's a clear answer in the law. It's a gray area. And so as I'm studying it, my brain is just processing and trying to figure out, wow, what should we do with this? This question hasn't been answered before. And then I go in after oral argument and I discuss it. We have court conference after we have a day of oral arguments. I discuss it with 4 other completely brilliant people, and we go back and forth and debate, and we do that every month on 10 cases. And so to try to process that information at the level that we have to, it's almost like I could feel my brain building, like if you were trying to become an endurance runner or a heavy, a weightlifter. Your brain is like, oh, I am stretching to be able to do this. I think it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Of all of my jobs, it is the hardest thing I have ever done. And sometimes my brain thinks, what are you doing to me? I can't have any more in here. I worked really hard yesterday and you're doing it to me again. So it is challenging. It is so challenging, but in a way that I love. There will never be a week in this job that I don't learn something new. If I did this for the rest of my life, I will learn something new, and I will push myself in a way that is very fulfilling and that I really, really love. So it's the hard part about this job, but it's also the great part about this job.
I feel like that's true of most things in life, right? There's always the double-edged sword of the good and bad to things. Judge McHugh, what are your thoughts on your favorite and least favorite parts of being a judge in the 10th Circuit?
Least favorite, isolation. Two least favorites, isolation and death penalty cases. We have a lot of them. I know Paige also, or Justice Petersen also hears those, but they don't get very many in Utah. We get them on what's called habeas corpus review. Oklahoma is one of the most prolific death penalty states in the union. So we see quite a few death penalty cases, and they are gut-wrenching. I don't think, anybody who's doing it right struggles with the seriousness of those cases. I mean, it's not like you can fix it later if you put somebody to death. So they're very difficult cases, and they weigh on me. So those are the two, but the best part is it is very interesting work, and I love associating with my law clerks and with my colleagues. And that is what's so hard about the pandemic, is it's so isolating. So I feel very isolated right now, but those relationships are wonderful. Everyone on both of my courts that I have worked with as a colleague, people always say activist judges or lazy judges. Everyone I have worked without any exceptions, they work very hard. They come in prepared to oral argument. They ask thoughtful questions at oral argument. They are ready to engage in a civil and detailed analytical discussion during conference. And then they try to get it down on paper in a way that answers the questions and develops the law. And I really feel honored to be part of both of the groups that I associated with on the bench. So that's nice to be able to work with people who share your commitment to service and excellence. So, and I know all three of the other women on this panel, I can say are definitely do that. So.
Thank you. That actually segues to, we have a couple of questions that are pending, but I did want to say when Judge McHugh was talking about death penalty cases, I laughed, but it was not about I was hearing strange noises from my children above me. So I apologize if it looked inappropriate. It was not, it was bad timing. Anyway, so Judge McHugh's last response though, she talked about having really good colleagues. And that's always been my experience in dealing with the different judges that I've been able to work with, both as clerks and as attorneys, or as a clerk and as an attorney. But the question is, what qualities make for a good judge? Maybe we can start with Judge McHugh, since you're unmuted already. Go ahead.
A lot of the same qualities that make a good law clerk. First of all, you can't have any axe to grind in the result, right? You've got, I always think of putting on the robe when you go out to sit on the bench as stepping into a role and divorcing from Carolyn McHugh, the person with her own feelings about things, to try to discipline myself to go out there and just try to get it right. And I think you need people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work hard. That, you know, when somebody comes in and dumps a bunch of briefs on the floor in their office, that they roll up their sleeves and they read them. You know, they don't rely on their law clerks to parrot them back to them. They actually read them, and they read the underlying portions of the record. And I think you have to have people who have an aptitude for legal analysis. I mean, you know, you can't do it without that. And I have no idea what makes people good at that. And what, you know, I think there's part of it that you're a little bit freakish. If you went into law school already knowing how to think like a lawyer, I think there's probably something wrong with you. But I think people can be trained. I think some people already think like a lawyer. Other people can be trained to think like a lawyer. And some people really never get it. And you need somebody in either the first or second category to serve as an appellate judge. And then you've got to be willing to reassess your positions on things. You can't just go into oral argument saying it's like this, and then be unwilling to listen to the arguments that you're hearing and your colleagues during conference. You've got to be open to the discussion. And sometimes, you know, you write stuff up and you look at it. I always say, if it doesn't write, W-R-I-T, it's not right, R-I-G-H-T-A. And so when you're trying to write something and you're pretty much feeling like you're forcing it, you need to step back and tear it apart and say, you know what, this might not be wrong. I mean, this might be wrong. So, because if the analysis is flowing, typically so does the prose. So I guess those are all kind of the same things. And you need to disagree civilly. You don't score points off of your colleagues by snarky little comments in a written opinion, and certainly not a comment on the bench that would be rude to one of your colleagues. So those would be my points.
Thank you. Justice Petersen, what do you think makes a good judge?
I think Judge McHugh just nailed it. Everything that she just said is 100% right. You know, humility, you cannot go in with your own agenda. You just can't. And I think that's a huge misconception that the American public has about judges right now. On the federal level, the news always talks about, oh, an Obama appointed judge, a Trump appointed judge. You are not supposed to be there for your own personal views. You're supposed to be there because you are a good jurist. And I think most judges do that. But boy, I think the public perception is very different than what the reality usually is, and what it really should be, is that we are there to be objective jurists and not to be partisans. And when we put on that robe, we need to be figuring out the right answer based on the law. And I think that's a given for us. That's what we try to do. And we do it on the appellate level in a group. So we have to go back and forth with colleagues who we may disagree with about what the law is supposed to be, but we have to work together day in and day out and be functional and have a healthy communication. And so we have to discipline ourselves to disagree and debate really complicated issues in a civil way. And there's no room for being nasty to each other. There's really not. It doesn't work. So it's a very disciplined job where you just can't go out and think you're right and this is just what my gut tells me and this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't work. So it's an extremely disciplined job.
Thank you. Judge Pohlman, if you have anything to add, and then maybe we'll also launch into our final question I think we'll have time for, which is how are the courts taking cases during the pandemic, if at all?
I think I will just add on this last bit about what you need to be a good judge. I think it's finding this right balance between being confident and also being willing to question yourself. And I think that's it's a delicate balance, because you need confidence to be able to make a decision. But at the same time, if you're willing to kind of question your instincts, question what you think, I think it's a very valuable thing to have as a judge, and it will make you a better judge if you're willing to kind of open up your mind and reconsider the fact that maybe you don't have it right on the first go around. So as far as what we're doing right now, so the Court of Appeals has been hearing arguments online since March. We were fortunate to be able to really quickly transition. As an appellate court, it's much easier, of course, to do than if you're in the trial court and you need witnesses and especially juries. So we've been using WebEx, and we just have a system like this where we have our court clerk and a clock, and we have counsel. And it's been great because we haven't, people keep asking me like, oh, are you not busy right now? I say, no, nothing has changed for us. We are just going along. And at some point, I anticipate we are going to see some change in our caseload when we have all of those non-criminal trials catch up to us, right? Because 50% of our caseload's criminal. And at some point where you're going to see a lag there, but at least for the short term, and probably even for the next year, I don't anticipate we'll see a change in our workload. And we've been really lucky to be able to work remotely. And we've also discovered that it works really well. So there may be instances in the future where, rather than have parties have to travel up from, say St. George or from Vernal, Utah, if it's more convenient for them to do it online like this, I think we will be very open to that. So, you always find silver linings and things. And I think that's one that we've found.
Judge McHugh, on the federal side, has anything, has the federal courts been handling it any differently?
Well, again, on the appellate side, we're doing the same thing, and we've been doing it since March, where we do our arguments online, and counsel is just like this, on basically a call like this, and we have a clock, and the panel, they can see the panel. They put in backgrounds that look like we're in the courtroom, but we're not. And so far, it's really been, we've had a couple times where counsel, for whatever reason, has had bad internet connection, and that's made it difficult to hear counsel. But otherwise, so far we've been doing well with it. And we are also just plowing through. We're very busy. There was a decision that had to do with the boundaries of the Indian reservation in Oklahoma that affects a whole lot of jurisdiction in criminal cases. So we've had an avalanche of criminal cases where they're all challenging the jurisdiction of the court that imposed their sentence. So we're busy.
Justice Petersen, maybe just in 30 seconds or so, do you have anything to add on that last point?
I'll just say we've been able, on the appellate level, we're lucky, just like Judge Pohlman said. So it's the same for the Utah Supreme Court. We've pretty much been able to do all of our work just like this. We kind of work with, we have a judicial council in the Utah state courts who are working very hard trying to figure out how to do trials. And the other thing the Supreme Court does is we are responsible for the civil rules, the criminal rules, the rules of evidence. So we're trying to figure out if there are any rules that need to be changed so that we can do trials remotely. And so we've been coordinating with the Judicial Council for our part of it, but boy, I've been watching them work and trying to figure out how can we do trials. And our numbers are, I think we all hoped we'd have good numbers by this point. We don't. So the overall courts and figuring out how to do trials has been, that's a real challenge. But on the appellate level, we've really been able to keep operating at 100%.
Great. Well, under normal conditions, all three of you work in jobs that are really, I think it was highlighted today, they're difficult, but really critical, important work. And even, I think now it's highlighted even more how much we rely on judges in the courts. And so thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and to help our students understand a little bit better what appellate judges do. And we will look forward to hearing from our trial court judges in a couple of weeks. But again, thank you to Judge McHugh, Judge Pohlman, and Justice Petersen for joining us today.
Thank you, Melinda.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Take care, everyone.